Good morning, good morning. This is John Dingfelder, and you're here listening to WMNF. This is Down and Dirty. I am joined by two esteemed guests, and we've got Skip on the board, Anthony taking your calls in a little while. And our guests today are Vic DeMaio of DeMaio and Associates, becoming a regular down here. Dressed to the nines. Both of you guys. James Shaw, attorney, partner downtown, but also a civil rights attorney and longtime ACLU guy. Good morning, James. Good morning, Vic.
Morning, John.
Good morning.
Yeah, you guys are all dressed up, making me feel bad and kind of schlumpy. Okay. You know, Vic, Skip and I are here casual. And
the point of radio, man.
It's radio.
But you guys are headed to Tiger Bay, I think around noon or so. What's going on in Tiger Bay today?
Well, today they're talking about the session, which started Tuesday, and a lot of craziness up there. It's a typical,
Already?
It's a typical Animal House up there. I'm glad I don't have a client this year.
What is some of the bigger issues they're wrestling with up there?
Property taxes, big one, big issue. You know,
are they really thinking about reducing or eliminating property taxes?
Well, you know, if you look at Tallahassee and how our whole lives are run by the Capitol and what goes on there, it's really it's a three-headed monster made up of the governor being one head, the House Speaker the other head, and the Senate President. Everybody else doesn't count. They're like players in a puppet show.
Little pawns.
I don't care if you're a senator or a House member. Those three guys control the entire world in Florida.
Wow.
And so right now, the House, although there's a tinkle match going on between the governor and the House Speaker from Miami. He's introduced a bunch of bills about how to cut taxes, and the governor's mad at him about having all these bills instead of one big one. And the Senate's done nothing. They don't have a bill. They have no plans to do anything. So this is going to be very interesting.
Maybe that's good if the Senate's kind of chilling on the side, and
it may be good.
Maybe it won't be as disruptive. On a personal note, of course, it'd be wonderful not to have taxes, any kind of taxes.
Sure.
But on a societal level,
right.
Property taxes are what, when I served on Tam City Council 10 years, property taxes, hold up city government. I mean, they basically pay for police
Cops,
and fire.
Right.
We wouldn't be, I don't know where we'd get the money to pay for police and fire if we didn't have property taxes.
Oh, I know, because I lived in Miami and the surrounding areas. It's by vigorous enforcement of the parking laws that becomes I'm serious, that becomes
oh my God,
a source of revenue for these governments.
Source.
And so you if your meter expires in 30 seconds, you will have a ticket because that's what they need to do.
Yeah, what was that little place outside Gainesville where they used to have cops with the speed
trap
guns?
Oh, gosh.
Starkey, right?
Stark.
Yeah, somebody put the billboard up that said there's a cop hiding behind this billboard. And
and they still ran it,
right.
So they made a lot of money. But Miami, there's a show on TV called Miami Towing or something, and it's all about the lives of these tow operators hooking up the cars and taking them away, and it's quite a funny show.
They are the financial backbone of that city. That's how they get their revenues.
Oh yes, it's a riot. It's a riot.
Hopefully, it won't come to that. So, are they addressing insurance, auto insurance, or property insurance? Or?
That's something I know a little bit at, because as you know, my dad was in the insurance business his whole life. I worked for the insurance commissioner for many years, and so I know a lot about this issue. But the problem is what's happened here is the Republicans they've had like 5 sessions to supposedly give reform, and all they've done is give the insurance companies every single thing they've ever dreamed of. A being you cannot sue your insurance company and get any money back. You guys are lawyers, I'm not, but I even talked to some big Republicans who had insurance claims. And at the beach, and the adjuster came out, and they saw a drop of water crack in the window. So, no, I ain't paying. It was like $100,000 claim. You guys are done. We ain't paying. I mean, they're looking for any little excuse to not pay the claim. No. That's how insurance companies make money. They take your premium and don't pay out, and that's why they're
It used to be that bad faith was a big deal. If they were acting in bad faith, right, James? that you could get additional compensation. I don't know if bad faith still exists.
It still exists. I know a little bit about that.
Yeah, I thought so.
But what the other side of that, though, is that the old statute said that if you win against your insurance company for a quarter, then you can recover your attorney's fees. That there were attorneys that were making cottage industries out of things like sending a demand letter and saying, pay this bill and 37 cents for the stamp on this demand letter, and then if somebody wouldn't reimburse that, they'd sue them for 37 cents.
Well, that's how you guys make your money, $1 a page for copying, and every time you get that 12-minute meter that rolls.
But unfortunately, that type of abuse invites the legislature to overreact,
right,
and do other things, right?
Yeah, there were a lot of abuses, but I'm not expecting the legislature to touch what they did in the last session, or in 2023, rather. I'm expecting that they're going to, wait a year and see how those reforms end up taking place. But, as a litigator, there's a big difference, I can tell you, in litigation right now. You're seeing a lot less frivolous lawsuits filed over silly things that they previously had a reason to go ahead and bring a lawsuit that clogs up the courts and causes litigation that doesn't need to exist because somebody's trying to get attorney's fees.
Yeah. So now you pay like auto insurance. They're lined up on TV. They do what's called we'll take your case on the come, meaning that once we settle, we take our cut. You pay you. This, you pay your lawyer from day one, from the moment. There's no, even if you win, you still have to pay your lawyer. So that automatically cuts down your claims, because who's going to pay $10,000 for a lawyer for a $10,000 claim? It's a wash. So that's it's cut down. The sad thing is, the reality is, insurance companies, I know a lot about these guys. They made money. Every hurricane, they take a hit. Everybody does. And within a year or two, they're making money again. So, these guys, the insurance companies crying poor, that's a joke. And a lot of guys that do go out of business, they go out because they're just incompetent people. They don't know how to run an insurance company. So the sad part is... Or
they're scoundrels and they've run away with a lot of money.
Right. Insurance lawyers, no disrespect to you two guys, but there's some scoundrels in that business too.
What? Well, anyway, we did get a little sidetracked on those issues, because the real issue I wanted to talk about today are national issues and Trump issues, and talk about Minnesota. If you want to call in, we'll be taking your calls probably about 10:30 thereabouts, 813-239-9663. But really couldn't have the show this week without talking about the tragedy in Minnesota, the tragedies that are happening all across the country in terms of the shootings, no other way to put it, the shootings by ICE agents. And James, your reaction, you've been an ACLU attorney, volunteer attorney for the ACLU for many, many years, and just generally knowledgeable about civil rights. James Shaw.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, and I don't think
except in bad history books or history books
right,
where we're reading about bad times in the 1930s and 40s.
Sure, but I have to go back that far, I guess, to think of a time period where the government was deploying force against protesters just to silence a point of view, to make people afraid to protest, which I think is part of what's behind it. I guess this particular officer who shot Ms. Good had experience, but a lot of these ICE recruits, were recruited off the internet. I suspect many of them are former January 6th defendants and Proud Boys and so forth that are recruited. Wouldn't you like to carry out your fantasies with the backing of the United States government? And I think a lot of people would. So you've got people who would not very much experience, perhaps motivated by all the wrong things out there on the street with the ability to use force. And there's no kind of sense of de-escalating conflicts. These are people who are looking for a fight.
Yeah. So. It'd be interesting to see a New York Times analysis of who these recruits are. I don't know if they're going to be able to get that information out of personnel files and that sort of thing. But not individually who they are. Joe Blow. We don't need to know their names, but what is their background?
Sure.
What are their qualifications to do this type of job.
There's a reason they're covering their faces. I think they anticipated what would likely be a pushback tactic, which would be to identify people and use facial recognition software and contact their mothers and say, "Can you see what your son's been doing?" And that sort of activism. So to cover their faces, it makes it anonymous, but that increases kind of the perception of fear that it's meant to inspire, because these masked people, I don't even know who they are. It's got the Squid Game kind of feel to it, that these masked people are doing sadistic things.
Vic, you're a guy a guy on the street. I can always count on you to have the pulse of the community, out there. I've looked at. My bride Lynn was pointing out to me this morning about Trump's numbers being at all-time lows.
38%.
38%. What, disapproval or approval?
Approval. The rest is all bad.
Yeah, or on the approval. Yeah.
Unless you're Republican.
Anyway, all of his numbers are really in the toilet. About 10-15% lower than when he got elected a year ago or inaugurated a year ago.
Right.
But
dropping like a rock.
What's the word on the street in regard to this Minnesota situation? I think it's happened in a couple of shootings in a couple of other states, right?
Yeah, and the most famous thing being that woman that was killed in her car driving away, point blank range, and the officer assumingly calling her a bad name. So yeah, that's really brought this to head, I think, more than anything else, because there was a few shootings last night. I guess somebody got shot in the leg, and there's fights going on, and they're egging each other on. But it's just, I think they're itching for a fight. In other words, they're bringing thousands of these brand new agents. A lot of in different departments that aren't really trained to control crowds. The police is trained to control crowds. The National Guard has training to control crowds. But some of these guys are, whatever they do in their particular agencies, they're not crowd control type people. They just, they do whatever their job is, and it's not that. So it's a different kind of training. And then I read somewhere where the actual training themselves, half of these guys are flunking the test. I mean, they have an open book test, meaning, okay, here's the book, here's the paper, you can read, you can research every answer and get it. And obviously the late night host having a field day because these guys I got to open the book, find the answer, and write it, and they can't pass that. And some of the things we're doing, like 5 push-ups, they can't. These guys are overweight, out of shape. They can't get a job anywhere else. So yeah, I'm going to sign up and protect the homeland, whatever that means. But yes, my caucus I'm president of is the Hispanic Caucus, and we cover the whole county, and I do stuff on a statewide level from friends in Miami and Orlando, and it's going on all over the state of Florida, which is Hispanics who live here. They're scared of, even in East County, Ruskin, Waimama, Brandon, Sun City, they're scared of even going out of their house. They're scared of going to the grocery store. They're scared of just going to get an ice cream with the kids. I mean, they're scared of taking the kids to school, for Christ's sake.
There's families in West Tampa, that have been in the United States, 30, 40, 50 years at least.
Right.
Still speaking Spanish because that's their comfort level, and that's fine.
Right.
But even they must be concerned and afraid, because not only their appearance, but their language.
Right.
That they could get picked up.
And the Supreme Court, as you guys know, okayed profiling. It started in a California case. I don't know if it applies everywhere, but I'm assuming it does. And they say, because they've appealed it, but they said, oh, yeah, if a guy looks Hispanic, if he's a little dark-skinned, speaks that Spanglish language, we can go right after this guy. So, I mean, that's not even protected by the Constitution anymore. But what's happening, and what many people may or may not know is, Abuela, grandma, has come over from Cuba, 30 years ago or 40 years ago, and she never bothered to get her papers. I mean, I've done a lot of knocking on doors and meeting people, and when I do help people with campaigns, and I ran up to several ladies, older ladies, and I said, I'm helping so-and-so, and they go, oh, yo no vota, meaning I don't vote. I go, what do you mean you don't vote? Oh, yo soy de Cuba, meaning I'm from Cuba, and yo no cogiste mis papeles, meaning I didn't get my papers. I go,
wow.
And how long you been here? Like, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So that's what's going on. That's even going on in Miami, which is freaking the Miami people out, because a lot of Hispanics, they just come here, they live at the house with the family, and they just go along with their day, and they are literally dragging those people out of the closets and taking them and shipping them to Cuba. There was a story here in Tampa of a lady showed up for immigration, and she had her son with her. They plucked her right out of the courthouse, and she's in Cuba, and the little boy's here with family members and crying every day for her mom, and that's been going on for 6 months now. That's what's going on. And in Miami area, they've had billboards from a billionaire Republican donor saying with a headline "Traitors" with Marco Rubio's face, Trump's face, because these guys, these Cubans, they're going to protect us regardless. And nope, Trump's overriding that. So I don't know and all that's playing to what started this whole conversation, which is Trump's 38% approval rating, because nobody's against picking up criminals and murderers. I don't think there's 11 million murderers running the street. That's what's the stupidity of this argument is like, we have 11 million murderers running around the streets? No, we don't. So they're grabbing like 100 people to get 5 or 10. And people are getting dragged out of their cars. You see it on TV. And they're U.S. citizens. They were born here half the time. Even if you are Hispanic or Mexican or Cuban like me, it's like ridiculous.
Makes me think of Alice's Restaurant. Do you remember, James?
Yeah.
Who's sitting on the Group W bench?
Right.
Mother rapers. Oh God, I wish it was humorous. So if you're just tuning in, this is John Dingfelder. You're listening to WMNF. I've got Vic DeMaio and James Shaw joining us in the studio. Going back to Minnesota. James, even in our lifetime as lawyers, 20, 30 years, in any other situation, whenever there's a police shooting, what happens? What happens in a normal, situation of police shooting or FBI shooting or what have you?
Well, you usually have an internal investigation, and I think that's part of the problem right now is that the vice president announced what he wanted to be the outcome of that investigation before it commenced, and so there's not any kind of sense of trust. And I've been vocal about that for a long time. Is that when you have an investigation, it needs to be carried out by somebody who is perceived as independent, so somebody who is not beginning the investigation with an outcome in mind, and
on either side,
right?
The ACLU shouldn't be doing the investigation either. It just should be some neutral agency. Right. But that didn't happen. Even Kristi Noem, the head of that particular agency of ICE and Homeland Security, within minutes, it seemed like she was exonerating the officer and saying, look the other way because there's nothing here, right?
Right. Rocky Brancato had an interesting post on LinkedIn about how this is a great illustration of how there's really no such thing as an impartial jury. I mean, here the whole country are looking at the same videos of this incident, and yet if you're left-leaning, you tend to see the same videos and come out with, she was trying to get away, and if you are right-leaning, you look at the exact same videos that the left-leaning people are looking at and say, well, she was clearly trying to hit the officer, and almost no one is making up their minds based on which direction was she turning the steering wheel in the videos. They're making up their minds based on their politics. So, who's going to take a look at this in an even-handed way and say, let me come up with an outcome that everyone can believe in? Nobody really believes that the federal government would impartially look at this. They've already announced what they want the outcome to be. And the one thing that you can always count on is from our administration is they'll never say, I was wrong earlier. That's something they don't know how to say. So now that they have said this is what the outcome's going to be, they'll get to the outcome that they want. But I saw the videos and it was clear to me that the gun was drawn before she began to move the vehicle. And I know what I would do if I was a pedestrian pulling a gun. I would drive away from that spot as fast as I possibly could, and that's what it looked like she was doing. And there's no question that she is turning the steering wheel to the right, not to the left, as the narrative goes, and that had she hit the gas, she would have driven away from him, not toward him. But he knew to lean into it and take the shot. And if there's any question as to whether he didn't say to himself, there's what do we call it in lawyers call it in court, an excited utterance. It is an exception to the hearsay rule because we believe it is reliable that when somebody spontaneously yells out a word from their guts that they really do mean that they wouldn't be lying. And he didn't say, thank God I averted that danger. He said, and if you heard it, the words that I just sang, and not an original observation. I've seen it all over Twitter, but every abused woman has heard those exact same words pronounced with those exact same notes. That is where he was in his headspace in that moment was, this person is annoying me, and I have the ability to use force against her and get away with it, and that's what I'm going to do.
And why, why not mace? Why not, tasers? You know what I mean? It's like the weapon, the gun should be the last thing, and that's even what their own policy says. The weapon is the last resort.
Yeah, because the window is wide open.
Not the first resort.
Right. And she said just before she got killed, I don't have a beef with you. I don't have a problem with you. And the question here in the investigation, the weirdest part is that the feds have taken over the investigation. They're not letting the
so-called investigation.
So-called investigation.
Who knows what they're doing?
And the key part of this one little episode is what angle does she get shot at? I think the sad part is you would, in a normal investigation, if she was sitting straight and that thing came in at an angle, clearly the car was, he was shooting from the side, not from the front. Right. Everybody knows that if a car is coming straight at you and you're a cop, you have the right to defend yourself. But this was not the case. So the question is, where exactly was he standing and when did he shoot? But the problem here is, and you guys are lawyers, you can help me out here. Can the feds do this? I mean, can the state intervene and do their own separate investigation? That would be interesting to me to see if they do their own. If I was a state, I would pursue it anyway. I don't know how that works legally.
Clearly, they're looking at that. I've read some articles about sovereign immunity and
the supremacy clause or something?
And absolute immunity, from these individuals, which clearly the federal government is going to assert. If and when the state attorney up there or whoever is the prosecutor up there decides to charge that officer with murder, and it will be very, very tricky legal challenge, because of sovereign immunity of the federal government. Sovereign immunity basically is the role. The king is sovereign, and you can't sue the king in this murderous. In my opinion, murderous officer, falls in the shadow of the king.
Yeah, that's. I forget that it comes from there sometimes, but yeah, the sovereign immunity was the idea that the courts operate under the authority of the king, and therefore they can't be used to sue the king. But in modern times, we have these waiver of sovereign immunity statutes. So I think in Florida, it's $200,000 worth of sovereign immunity is waived for the state of Florida. You can sue the state of Florida for a tort for if a Florida state employee negligently injures you, for instance, and recover up to $200,000. And then if you get a verdict above that, you have to go to the legislature and ask them to appropriate the money in a claims
bill. If it's really egregious.
And I've seen some really egregious ones where they still wouldn't even pay the money. So that becomes this long shot, but that's how sovereign immunity works. Now, law enforcement officers don't have absolute immunity; they have qualified immunity. So and qualified immunity is.
But the vice president said they have absolute immunity. Well, and he's a lawyer
from Yale. I mean, he knows better, right? They don't have absolute immunity to do whatever they wish. The way that qualified immunity works is that as long as you are acting within what you reasonably believe is what's required of you, if you think you are complying with the law, and you're allowed to be wrong, there's a margin of error, but you are not immune, though, if you absolutely know that what you are doing is a crime and you're doing it anyway, and that it is not justified by the needs of the moment. And so that determination gets made by the courts. Now, I think the argument that the administration would make if the state of Minnesota tried to prosecute him under state law is that he was carrying out a federal function and the state can't regulate what's happening federally. That's up to the federal government to do anything about that. I can't believe we're talking about this because I've been saying that a lot. I can't believe we're talking about invading Greenland, but there is no limitations period in Minnesota on a murder charge. This administration has an expiration date. I mean, it won't go forever. So one of the protest signs that I see that's probably one of the more effective ones is the ones that say "See you at Nuremberg," and it is this idea that I think we all need to talk about later, that right now, I mean, this has never happened before. There's never been a United States president that says, go ahead and commit violent crimes in my name, I will pardon you. That's a new one. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you can't do that, but everyone up until now had the self-restraint to not do something so blatantly awful, and we have somebody now who doesn't feel that self-restraint.
Who's encouraging it. They're encouraging it.
But it won't last forever, right? So if 10 years from now the state of Minnesota decides to prosecute the men that shot this woman, they can still do that.
So maybe the government should hold off now to avoid double jeopardy.
Because, well, a future administration probably wouldn't as forcefully make that argument that they and only they get to decide whether or not the law was violated here. So,
well, what I threw out to you guys could the state do their own separate investigation? Just investigate. In other words, start gathering the evidence, interview the witnesses, put it down on paper, and then.
I think the state the state of Minnesota has been a little hesitant. Their own equivalent of our Florida Department of Law Enforcement has been a little hesitant because the crime scene has been tainted. Mm-hmm. The three officers, there was no typical crime scene yellow tape investigation as far as I could see. The three officers were allowed to just leave. Which was like unheard of, apparently, without being interviewed immediately, separately. They were allowed to get in a car and go home together. Wow. So, what do people inherently do? They get their story together, so they all have the same story. So that's tainted.
Right.
The whole situation's tainted, and I think the Minnesota Justice, Department of Justice law enforcement folks are now hesitant to even try.
I don't know how much investigation you need, though. You caught it from 5 different angles.
And 1,000 cameras running.
I mean, everybody knows what happened. There's no question as to what happened and who did it. It's just a question of did he or didn't he have legal justification to do that, or is it just something he wanted to do? And I think that's a question the courts can deal with 5 years from now or 10 years from now.
I bet the cynics are probably saying that AI has generated these liberal videos, right?
Well, that's going to happen. Because you're going to see that in both sides. You're going to see legitimate things written off as AI, and you're going to see AI things that are taken at face value. And like like I was saying a minute ago, your politics tend to determine that. So whatever meta narrative you have fallen in love with, people tend to believe things that they see that are consistent with it, and write off things that they see that are inconsistent with it.
And that's what you see even on TV as armchair quarterbacks, that watch Law and Order, where the feds come in and say, hey, this is our guy. You guys bug off. This is our case or whatever, And
I think that's real.
It is real. I'm sure it is. I mean, maybe
I've heard it locally.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's part of the supremacy clause where the federal government supersedes the state government, which is part of the argument that Jefferson and Hamilton had in the Federalist Papers, 100.
Well, sometimes it's a good thing, because look back in the 50s and 60s when the federal government came in with their civil rights divisions,
right?
And pushed aside the southern governments and said, no, we need to do the right thing.
Correct.
Whether or not it was voting rights or, more, horrible things that were going on.
Right.
But now we've got the flip side of that.
Right.
Which is pretty crazy. So this is John Dingfelder. You're listening to Down and Dirty. Our phone number is 813-239-9663. Feel free to call in and join the conversation. We're talking, let's say, everything Trump today.
That's fun.
What else?
To me, one thing I'd like to say, and I know it's maybe a little early, but one thing we do is encourage people to register and vote. The new laws in Florida.
It's never too early.
It's never too early, right? Because the new laws in Florida, in fact, my mom got a thing saying, because anybody who voted by absentee and signed up whatever year you go, that's all wiped up. We literally starting from zero. And
because they changed the law.
They changed the law.
State government changed the law, said there was too much fraud and abuse, which there wasn't.
Right.
And they said, okay, anybody who signed up said Because now apparently Republicans don't like absentee voting. They don't like they vote by mail.
Ironically, years ago, I've been doing this my whole life. My mom and dad ran for office in a million campaigns all over the state, and the party that was really good about absentee voting was the Republican Party. They really perfected it. And then Obama came around, and as he signed up voters to vote, and I saw that operation that ran out of Chicago, and they signed them up absentee. Not only do you sign up to register, but you sign up as absentee. So they tracked everybody's vote to see if you voted, and so we became experts, and now the Republicans don't like it. At least Trump does.
So then they passed laws.
So they said, okay, we're going to start from zero. Whoever registered absentee, you're done. We got to re-register again. And that's hard. The Democrats, Republicans vote like machines. There's three basic groups. Let's start from square one. You got Republicans. If you run as a Republican, I guarantee you 40% of the vote. You run as a Democrat, I guarantee you 40% of the vote. But there's a group called independents, and they're in the middle. And they're the ones that swing back and forth, and they're the ones that really decide elections. Right now, Trump is bleeding those like nobody's business. So the Democrats and the independents are strongly anti-Trump. It's the Republicans who still love him by 80%. So we got to get people out. We got to register votes, and
there's a special election in mainly South
Tampa, right?
For a Senate seat,
right?
We're going to have Craig Latimer here from the supervisor of election in a couple of weeks to talk about registration and that sort of thing. But in the bigger picture, coming up in November, Democrats have been making some headway around the country, right, Vic?
Yeah, what's that? We had about 80,000 more votes, Democrats in Hillsborough County just about 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's about 20,000 more Republicans. And that number is actually held for probably about 6 months. It was a fast change, and I don't know exactly what's going on. I do know for a fact the Republicans have the money, like 10 times more than Democrats at the moment, because they control all branches of government. They control the governor, the House, the Senate.
Well, we had to have a whole other show about the swing of politics,
right,
in terms of Hillsborough County. But in terms of nationally, there have been elections, including Mamdani in New York, and the what do you call it?
Special elections?
That California,
yes.
Big election.
The proposition, you mean, too? Yes, yeah. And
so,
that got to help.
So there's been some glimmer. There's been some glimmer of hope.
Yes.
For Democrats.
But is us three bananas? No, this is Florida, and Florida's a little bit different. Is it blue? Is it red? Is it purple? That depends. The city of Tampa is all Democrat. The mayor's all, and we've never had a Republican mayor, but we're like an enclave and an island. Miami made big news because for the first time in decades, they elected a Democratic mayor.
Was that the city of Miami or Miami
Beach?
Yes,
there's Miami Beach and there's city of Miami. Yeah. So this was the city of Miami, not Miami Beach.
Democratic mayor.
Yeah, Miami Beach has had a series of...
That's more liberal.
It's more liberal.
Yeah. Well, listen, we've got William in St. Petersburg wanting to join the conversation. Let's see what he has to say.
Hi there. I like your show.
Oh, thanks, William. We appreciate it. And don't forget us. We got Pledge coming up in a couple of weeks.
I'm well aware of that. Okay. We could talk about Donald Trump until the cows come home. And I've said it before on this radio station. Talking about Donald Trump is like locking the barn door after the horse was stolen. And I really do mean that. My grandmother said that a long time ago about something. I don't know. However, people still voted for him. That's our democratic, our Constitution. But it just amazes me that there are so many men, especially because most of my neighborhood are blue-collar white men who voted for Trump, and they don't see any wrong with him. But
even today, even with these atrocious things happening.
Even today. And, it's the same thing with the press and everybody talking about Trump. It's like me inviting a kleptomaniac into my house and then running around screaming, I can't believe that my stuff is stolen. It's the same thing. And all we do is wait for him to strike first, like a rattlesnake or a cobra. And then just like with a rattlesnake or a cobra, when they retract, we all sit there and think, gee, we hope he doesn't strike again. And then he does. So why don't we, the educated population, get together and do something before he strikes again? I mean, is he going to push that little red button that we all hear about and start another war and then say, gee, maybe we should have done something? That's just my statement.
Well, we appreciate it, William. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening, bud.
What I started to say, and what I'll finish up here, is this. We talked about the electorate. We talked about the Democrats. But we have this thing coming up called the midterms. And it's going to be this year. This is 2026. It's going to happen in November. We have a chance collectively to stop the madness, and it's going to happen just a few months from now. So we got to register to vote.
We're only a few seats away in the U.S. House.
I mean, they're down to like 2 seats in the House. If we could take back the House, of the, we can stop the madness. We can stop the madness if we take back the House. And we can even do it here in Florida. We can flip one. They only have 2-3 seats in the House. I mean, it's crazy. So we can stop this, people. Listen up. Register to vote. You got to vote. And if you're inclined, if you're listening to the station, you're, pretty much, either an independent or a Democrat. And I'm sure there's a few Republicans that are upset about what's going on. But we can stop the madness. We can stop Trump. He won't get to do all the crazy stuff that has been getting away with. That's why this is what we do. That's what our Buy Caucus is doing. We're trying to get people awake. And if the reason Democrats lose is because they don't vote. Yeah. And Democrats are hard to vote. You got to pick them up at the house, take them to lunch, buy them dinner. Republicans will vote like crazy.
So here's the thing. And if I had gone to the trouble of running to go to Congress or, running to be in the U.S. Senate, okay, which is a huge undertaking and a huge commitment of your life and your family and everything else. So then you get to the U.S. Senate, and all of a sudden you have a president who is basically ignoring Congress and ignoring the Senate in regard to going out and, bombing Iran without permission, attacking Venezuela, without the advice of the Senate or a declaration of war. James, this is crazy. And if you're a senator, like I say, wouldn't you be offended?
Right?
I mean, that's what the Constitution, I believe, says.
Yeah, I imagine somebody in that situation is in a spot where there's a fear that if I shout the emperor is wearing no clothes, what if no one backs me up on that? So we're in this kind of moment like that. I'm optimistic, notwithstanding everything, John, that this is not the first time in history and won't be the last time in history that a nation has become fascinated with the whims of a charismatic, bombastic person, but just as quickly as they fall in love, they fall out of love, and the pendulum will swing back.
The Senate was close the other day. They came up with a resolution, all the Democrats obviously, but I think they had about 8 or 10.
There's like seven
Republicans that were going to come on board and say, wait a second, what was that resolution? It was like...
it was trying to limit what's going on in Venezuela, where Trump's declared himself president of Venezuela, on Facebook anyway. I don't know if that's a new law that I've never heard of. But yeah, it came down, and 2 people flipped.
Yeah,
it came down to a 50-50 vote, and as we know, the presiding officer, which is by constitutional law or whatever, he can split. He can split the vote, and so Vance came in, and it made it 51-50.
Yeah.
So that's how they killed it.
We're getting some calls today. We are striking fear in the hearts of in the ears of our listeners. All right, let's go with Mike in Sarasota. Mike, and our time is running short. My goodness.
I'll make it as brief as I can. I just wanted to respond to the previous caller, and he was wondering why people don't vote for Democrats. And I will just offer 3 or 4 reasons very quickly. And I'm not making value judgments, but it's just practical politics. The Democrats have been smeared lately because of some radical positions that cause people who would otherwise vote for them to vote against them. And I'm speaking from experience here. I know a guy who voted for Trump in the last election and citing some of these things. Example, Kamala Harris got tagged as being for transgender surgical operations.
Right, we get sidetracked on social issues. What else?
Yeah, well, then there's also defund the police. And then there's also, and this comes from the election, the last election with DeSantis versus, I guess it wasn't the last election, it was DeSantis versus that Mayor Gillum from Tallahassee. But Susan McManus, a professor from USF, found out that black voters had switched in significant numbers to DeSantis over fears that their sons would be targeted with sexual harassment claims. So my advice to Democrats is to get rid of these issues, these hot-button social issues which antagonize people, and stick to things, to bread-and-butter issues, kind of like what Zoran Mamdani has done.
All right. We appreciate it. We appreciate it. Take care. All right. I swear I've got so many calls. I don't know what I'm going to do here. All right. George in Davenport.
Yeah.
Hey, George.
How you doing today?
Good. What's up? Hit us quick.
Question. Yeah, you were bringing up about the voting and everything went from absentee voting and everything went back to the calendar of 0.
Yeah.
I live in Polk County. Do I need to go back down to Bartow?
Yes.
Which is an hour away from my house.
Yes.
I think you might be able to do it online.
You can call, do it online.
Yeah.
Oh, I can? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, give them a shout. But definitely reach out. Everybody who's listening, make sure that if you like to vote absentee, by mail, whatever, reach out to your supervisor of election in your county and make sure that you're up to date on that. Thanks for the call, George.
Here in Hillsborough, it's
Thank you for the information, gentlemen.
All right.
votehillsborough.org is where you can go to request a mail-in ballot. You have to do it again, even if you voted by mail-in ballot last time. So
correct.
My wife and I just did that.
It's very easy. Very easy.
Now's the time.
And by the way, the law in Florida says, because there's some goofiness going on with the post office saying that, some states say that, if it's postmarked by election day, it still counts. That's why California takes 3 weeks to count the ballots. In Florida, it's got to be in by 7 p.m. election day. I don't care if it's by Pony Express, car, it's got to be in, no matter where it's
your mail-in ballot. All right,
Right.
We've got Basil, perhaps, in Largo. Sorry if I messed up your name.
That's okay. It's pronounced Basil, actually.
I tried being sophisticated here. All right, go ahead. Basil.
Well, just 2 quick things, because I'm at work. One of the things that I was concerned about is all these controversial things that the administration is doing. A lot of it is diversionary tactics.
Right.
You have one crazy thing going on after the other, and, with...
The Epstein cover-up, right.
Right. So you move on from that and you do something even crazier, diverts the attention off of one thing and puts it to another.
My wife says, "What's this week's smoke screen?" Thank you, Basil. We appreciate it.
Quick thing. Also, they badmouth the coastal elite. Now, earlier on the program, there's an interview by a graduate of Columbia University. Obviously, a very intelligent person. When I listened, okay, but who is also a coastal elite? Is not Trump a coastal elite? He went to school in Wharton, most expensive tuition in the nation, and born and raised in New York City.
There you go.
Again, how do you badmouth one when you are of that? So if you tell a lie enough times, it becomes the truth.
Perhaps a little hypocrisy there. Thank you. All right, we've got our good friend and esteemed colleague, Mr. Tom Skerritt, is calling in.
Hi, John.
Hey, good morning. James Shaw, Victor Mayo, and now Tom Skerritt. Tom, I'm sorry, we got 10 minutes to go, but I did invite you to call in. I wanted to hear your words of wisdom on all of these issues.
Okay, well, I thought I just called in, so I have not been listening. I apologize, but
Oh my God, you've been out gardening.
I have. As a matter of fact.
Well, we've been talking about Minnesota, then we were talking about the upcoming elections. James Shaw has suggested that there will be a Nuremberg type of trial when all of this is over and sanity returns. Anyway, what do you think? Talk to us about sovereign immunity and absolute immunity, because you've done a lot of that litigation, Tom.
Well, Trump has claimed that he is immune in so many different ways, right? And let me talk a little bit about what happened with the Washington Post reporter, Hannah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Very important.
She the FBI had a search warrant approved, and they went in and got her cell phone, 2 laptops, and a smartwatch, right? And the reason that they went in supposedly is because they said she took classified information, which ironically is exactly what President Trump did, right?
Yeah. Had his bathroom filled up with it.
Yes, exactly. So this action is illegal. There's no basis for it. They can't come up with one in the press, so they really don't have one legally. It's a fabrication by the Department of Justice and President Trump, and it's a violation of statutory law, and more importantly, a violation of the freedom, your right of free speech. So what it appears to be is an attempt to quash the voice and the pen of anyone who bothers President Trump. Now, she's smart, Nicholson, because she's not resisting, which they want. They want her to resist, right? Then they can talk about that as opposed to the fact that they have no basis for the warrant. So she's cooperating, and already the DOJ is moving on to the new target, which is the contractor that supposedly had something to do with the classified documents. I think his name is Perez Lagones. And then when he has nothing, they'll just move on to something else. It's about trying to intimidate anyone who raises their voice to Trump or any of his puppets.
Well, it's that chilling effect,
right?
And going back to my household, last weekend after the Minnesota shooting, I turned to Lynn and I said, let me know if you see on Facebook if there's going to be a protest downtown. Okay, because we're going to go downtown and protest.
And there was, actually. There were a couple.
Was there?
Yeah,
and my bride, who's always up for a protest, she said, that scares the hell out of me. Because who knows what federal agencies are going to show up with their guns drawn.
Right.
And so that chilling effect has actually impacted us, in terms of our right to resist.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so who do we look for help, right? Well, it should be Congress. All right, Congress should be all over this. They should be restraining President Trump. They should be passing laws that make it illegal to go into Venezuela without their approval. But they're not, because a lot of people would say they're puppets as well. They're spineless. So what I believe is like one of the last bastions is the federal courts, and not not the appellate courts, the trial courts. They are, doing their job, whether they're, Trump judges or, Biden judges. They're doing their job. But the problem is that the appellate courts are reversing what they're doing. I just read an article saying that, Trump appellate judges have about a 90% success rate for Trump. No court should have a 90% success rate for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I worry about who we have. I think that the protests are very important. They are getting more and more dangerous. I mean, how does an ICE agent shoot an unarmed mother in the face and without any type of threat? I mean, John, you remember when we did civil rights cases together. The threat has to be commensurate with the action, right? She was a 0 threat, or maybe a 1 or a 2 on a scale of 10, and that certainly doesn't justify.
One thing, Tom. Sorry to interrupt. One thing that James Shaw pointed out, and I think he attributed it to Rocky Brancato, is that everybody can see this evidence slightly different, and so if you're a hardcore conservative Trumper, you look at that van that she was driving and see it as a dangerous instrumentality headed toward that poor ICE agent. And, it's just like picking a jury, everybody's going to see that, those videos slightly different through their own eyes. Did I quote that properly, James?
You're right. And if you watch Fox or Newsmax, you're in that silo, and they have people reinforcing that. And if you watch CNN or MSNBC or whatever, or MS Now, I guess.
If you watch Fox or Newsmax, you probably haven't seen the video from the angle where she's turning
right.
Right. I mean, I'm serious. They're conservative media outlets, not just because of what they tell you, but because of what they don't tell you. And so I wouldn't shock me if they haven't seen the video where she's very clearly turning the wheel to the right.
Wow. Let me try and take another call. Tom, hang in there. I think you should be able to stay on with us. Let's see if Chris from Clearwater.
Hi, good morning, gentlemen.
Hey.
Hi, Jeff Hampton, Attorney Jeff Hampton on YouTube. See his channel, Hampton Law. on YouTube, and yesterday posted a very good video without any opinion, just showing legal criteria. I encourage folks to watch, entitled Lawyer, the legal issue nobody is talking about, Minnesota ICE shooting. And it talks about absolute immunity and Ray Nagel, Supreme Court decision in 1890 in Ray Nagel that supposedly gives absolute immunity, in their opinion, I say. But, and also Bivens and, the Federal Tort Claims Act, he mentions there's a carve-out for law enforcement. But, I think that since the Civil Rights Act of 1871 was passed, which allowed us to sue state and local law enforcement, as you know, Title 42 of the U.S. Code, Section 1983, following sections. There's no provision to sue federal law enforcement for civil rights deprivations that are committed under color of law. So we just have to pressure Congress to pass this kind of legislation. And the DOJ can criminally prosecute bad actors for deprivations of rights under Title 18, Sections 241 and 242 of the U.S. Code. And also, what do you think about, if you've seen the Supreme Court case John Bad Elk v. U.S. in 1900 that established the right to resist unlawful arrest using deadly force, in that case because there was no probable cause, and the ability of the sheriff to call up the militia.
All right, Chris, you bring up some good points, some good questions. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. James, did any of those strike a chord with you?
I did want to go back to something Tom was talking about with Hannah Nathan's.
Tom, I'm sorry we lost you. Go ahead.
It is. So up until recently, there was an internal rule at the Department of Justice that we just don't serve search warrants on journalists. That's not done, except in...
And a magistrate or a judge had to sign off on that too, right?
Right. So it's, it wasn't something that the DOJ tried to do previously. This is a new thing to just go seize the laptops of journalists that are reporting on issues that we'd rather they weren't reporting on.
So our locally born and bred Attorney General Pam Bondi, we have her to thank for this change.
And Trump's mad at her, and he's mad at Chris, because they're not.
He's mad at them?
Can you imagine? I've been reading a lot of articles lately because they're not being bigger pain in the behinds that he wants them to be. So it's bizarre.
I'm starting to think it's a bad strategy to try to get close to that guy because he eventually turns on you.
He does.
It shocks me how many people can't piece that together.
Right. You're right.
All right, let's see if we can squeeze in two quick callers in the last 2 minutes. David in Lakeland, good morning. Hey, what's up? You got about a second or two.
I want to tell you, Donald Trump is the worst thing that has happened to this country. I'm a Republican. My whole family is a Republican. This guy is out-of-control Nazi boy.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see, everybody knows what the hell is going on.
Well, we appreciate your comments, David, and I'm glad to hear that Republicans feel that way too.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, and hang in there. All right. And last but not least, Terry in Clearwater.
Yeah, Terry in Clearwater. I think the primary problem with the Democrats in getting elected is the Democrats have too many issues. Even if you and I are on the same side, if I list 20 things that I think are important, you're going to find some that you don't like, some that you find repulsive.
He's right.
3 items that you think everybody's going to like and they should like.
Right.
And hammer them.
Yeah, right.
And stay on those 3 issues.
Right.
Don't run around. Worry about that other crap when you get elected. Nothing you say matters.
Amen.
You're sitting in the chair.
Amen.
Terry,
Don't these guys get it?
you got a lot of nodding heads, here. We appreciate your call. Appreciate everybody's listening today. And what do we got, Skip? A couple of seconds? 45 seconds. All right. Well, let's just wrap up. Vic DeMaio, DeMaio and Associates.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. You can see Vic at Tiger Bay in a little while, but be nice.
Register and vote. Please.
James Shaw, attorney, civil rights attorney, and overall good guy. James, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah. Tom Skerritt, if you're listening, sorry I accidentally hung up on you, but we appreciate you calling in. And Skip and Anthony, thanks for supporting us. This is John Dingfelder, Down and Dirty, WMNF, and have a wonderful week.
WMNF Tampa.